In this section, I'll be introducing you to Stackmob. Stackmob is a platform built for mobile developers to help them simply and easily add a back-end services to their mobile apps using either native or JavaScript SDKs. And in this diagram, you can see the native SDKs or JavaScript SDKs talk to the Stackmob cloud backend through an API that provides them create, read, update, and delete abilities on a data store. It has push notifications, integration for user management using Facebook or Twitter, so your users can log in using one of those social networks. It provides analytics, and most importantly, it has the ability for you to write custom code, so you can actually write your own custom logic and your own custom implementations and deploy those to StackMob servers as well. So it gets you out of the business of having to maintain and manage your own back end. So we like to think of it as your API. So many companies out there have third-party APIs that they expose to you. And this is going to be your API for your application. And as I mentioned, there's native iOS and Android SDKs, as well as the JavaScript SDK, which we've built on top of Backbone.js. So what we saw earlier in this lesson was we talked about models and collections. Stackmob has simply extended those so that when you save a new object, a new model, it actually gets saved up into the cloud to StackMob's servers. So when you get started on Stackmob, you'll go in to create your new account, and once you've signed up, you can create an application. And during the creation process, you'll get to choose which platform you're targeting. Now, of course, this is a simple REST API, so any SDK can talk to this backend, whether it's iOS, Android, or JavaScript. But by selecting a platform, we're going to give you specific instructions on how to get up and running and actually get Stackmob installed inside your project. So on step 2 of the getting started, you can download a JavaScript starter project, and you can then get your initialization method, which has your public API key, and you can copy and paste that straight from the Getting Started page. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually create an app, and we'll copy that initialization file and put it into an HTML file that I've created for you in the hands-on directory. So let's go over to our browser and do that right now. So here I am in the StackMob dashboard, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new application right here. So I'll say create new app. And let's give this a name. I'll call it my Backbone tutorial. And I'm going to go ahead and choose HTML5 as my platform. And hit step 2 so I can create my app. And now what this has done is it gives me a button here where I can download a starter project which has a lot of explanation about how to use the Stackmob SDK. But it also has a local server which you can run from your command line, and I'll show you how to do that, as well as this initialization script which we can copy and paste into our index file. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to jump over to my editor, and I've already opened up the index.html file which is located inside my hands-on directory, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste the Stackmob init file right here. So this is my new app I just created, and I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to go back and say how do I actually run this code, because I can't just open this index file up inside of my browser and have it run. I actually need to run Stackmob's local runner. So let's go in there, and you'll see we've got a file here called StackMobServer.py. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my terminal, and I'm going to actually start that file up for me. So I've navigated to the hands-on directory from the terminal. So if you aren't familiar with using the terminal, you can go into your Mac and you can just start writing terminal, and it will pop up here in your list, and you can launch that. And then the easiest way to get to your hands-on directory is just to do a CD, and then I like to go to the Finder, and I go and find that folder. So let's see, I've got it sort of buried here among all my talks. There's my workshop. So there's my hands-on directory. Maybe it's on your desktop, and I'm going to drag and drop it here. And now when I hit enter, I actually do a change directory, a CD. And now if I want to make sure I'm in the right directory, I do ls to list all the files that I have in my directory. And there I can see all the files for my lesson, including the StackMob Python directory. So I'm going to start that up by typing Python and then StackMobServer.py. And I hit start, and it should say serving at port 4567. And what that means is that now if I go to my browser and I navigate to localhost colon 4567, or if I go to this IP address 127.0.0.1, that's going to be my local host as well. But I don't want to navigate there just yet. I actually want to finish this process. And then I actually want to go into my dashboard because I want to show you something about StackMob. When you create a brand new app, when you go under schema configurations, we automatically create a user schema for every application that is created on StackMob. And that user schema is where you'll save your users' username and password when they create a user account inside of your app. And then you can use those user profiles to actually secure your data that they're saving onto StackMob. But I want to show you there's no schemas, nothing exists yet other than the user schema. And now if I go back here and I relaunch my localhost 4567, let's do a refresh on that. And you'll see I don't have any wines listed here. I haven't created any yet. So I'm going to go ahead and say add new wine, and I'll put in Sterling Vineyards, and I'll go ahead and hit save. And now what that has done is that's created the first instance of my wine model. And when I hit save, it actually called up to StackMob, and it passed up that model, and StackMob took that and figured out what kind of database schema it needed to generate for my app. So if I go back to my dashboard here and I do a refresh on my schemas, we'll see we now actually have a new schema called wines. And if I click edit and go in there, I can actually see all the properties on my schema. We see we have a wines ID, we have a name, and some other default fields that get created for us. So there we've, very simple, we've got our wines schema created for us. And I can actually start persisting data here. I can actually add another one if I want. I'll say opus 1, that's a good one to have. And so that just persisted that object and came back and refreshed my list over here. You notice I didn't do a full page refresh. Backbone is working as it should. And if I go back to my dashboard, I can actually go into my data management console here, and I can do a query against my wines to just make sure all the data is getting saved correctly. And there it is. We see Opus 1, Sterling Vineyards are being saved up onto StackMob. And that literally took me a couple minutes to get my create my new app, get my initialization file, and drop it in there with my my API key. So we've gone ahead and we've edited that file, and I've opened up the terminal and I started my Python server. And what did I need to add to that index file to actually use StackMob? Well, what I did was I took out that Backbone.js and the _JS files, and I replaced them with this Stackmob bundled file. We've actually bundled all the libraries together into one minified JavaScript library for you. So all you need to include is jQuery and the Stackmob JavaScript SDK, which has backbone and underscore already bundled in with it. The next thing I did was I added that initialization call inside of my JavaScript at the very top to initialize Stackmob. And then let's take a look at our models and collections. What did I have to change in order to get them to work with Stackmob? So what I did was I changed the backbone.model.extend to stackmob.model.extend, and then I added one additional attribute, and that is the schema name, and I set it to wines. I could have set it to anything I wanted, but I wanted to call my schema wines. And then I created a new collection called, which I created a new instance called stackmob.collections.extend, and that is my new wines collection. And then I create a new instance of that wines collection by calling wines equals new wines. And then I'm calling a fetch, which is sort of my way of saying, go and get me all the wines you have up there on Stackmob right now. And I'm doing that asynchronously. And as you remember earlier, whenever my collection changes, my list view will update itself. Now, when we save a new wine, before we were just creating the model and just adding it to my collection. So with Stackmob, what we want to do is we want to use the create method. So we do a new instance of our wine model. We set the name by pulling the value out of that field. And then we're doing a wine.create method. And inside of that method, we can declare a success and an error callback function. In this example, I've just declared the success. And so if it's successful, then I want to call collection.add, and I want to add that model that gets returned in the success handler. Now, the reason I want to add it to the collection at that point is because the model that comes back from the success handler has my new wine ID inside of it. And I'm going to need that for if I want to do an update to that actual model. And when I load my model in my list view, I wanted to change that a little bit. What I wanted to do was I wanted to add an href around the name of any of my wines, and I wanted to use, I wanted to point to an update route, and I wanted to pass in that new wines ID that gets created when a new object's created on Stackmob. And then inside of my app router, I can declare that inside of my update function, when I go to my update route, I want to grab the argument that's passed in, which is the update function, and then it's passing in the argument of e. I say wines.get, and I pass in the e. So I'm saying to my collection, go and get me this specific wine and assign it to a value called model. And then I can pass that model into my update view, and then that will populate my form field with the actual wine that I just clicked on. And here's my update view. So here you can see I'm going and I'm declaring that this.model equals this.options.model. So when I pass in that argument from the router and I pass in that model, I can then pull it out of there. You can declare any kind of option to pass into your view, but in this case I'm just declaring that I want to pass in this model object. Then inside of my render statement, you can see in my render function that I'm passing into my template this.model.toJSON, so that'll pass that specific wine name into my template and it'll render into the form. And then when I save it, I'm doing this.model.save. And that way, Stackmob knows that this is an existing model and it needs to be updated on Stackmob. Instead of creating a new instance of this model, it's saying save this changes to this model. And so it's whatever values I pass in, those will be updated. And then on success, I want to remove the form from the view. And so for homework, what would be cool is if you wanted to go ahead, you could add a delete feature. But let me jump back to my browser so I can actually show you that update in action. So here I've got Opus 1, and when I click on it, you'll see that Opus 1 gets populated here in the form field, and you'll also notice that my update route shows up here in the browser bar along with the ID. If I click on Sterling Vineyards, that changes the ID up here as well. Now if I wanted to, let's say it wasn't Sterling Vineyards, but it was actually Cake Bread Cellars that I went to, and I go ahead and hit save, that is going to update my changes over here. And when I click on Opus 1 or Cake Bread, that updates. But most importantly, if I go ahead and do a refresh on this page, we see that Cake Bread Cellars and Opus 1, when I do a refresh, gets retrieved from Stackmob. And so it is actually updating the values on the server for me. So that covers our first lesson on Stackmob and setting up our project, and we are starting to create and read and update data on Stackmob. And in other modules, we'll look into other features and other things that you can do with Stackmob.